Mia Sullivan's weathered hands moved carefully across the surface of an antique oak table, feeling for imperfections that younger eyes might miss. At 52, she had learned to find satisfaction in the quiet work of restoration, bringing forgotten pieces back to life in her workshop on the edge of Cedar Ridge, a mountain town where everyone knew everyone's business except hers. The workshop occupied the ground floor of a converted barn, filled with furniture in various stages of repair. Sunlight filtered through dust motes, illuminating her careful work as she sanded away decades of neglect from a Victorian writing desk. Her auburn hair, now streaked with silver, was pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed the small scar along her left temple, a reminder of adventures she never spoke about. "Morning, Mia," called Ruth Patterson, the elderly owner of the neighboring flower farm. "Working on something special today?" "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. Just helping this old desk remember what it used to be," Mia replied with a gentle smile. She had perfected the art of pleasant conversation that revealed nothing about herself. The townspeople of Cedar Ridge knew Mia as the quiet woman who could fix anything made of wood, who charged fair prices and kept to herself. They didn't know that the hands now delicately applying wood stain had once operated helicopter controls in hurricane conditions, or that the calm woman who listened patiently to their requests had coordinated rescue operations in war zones across 3 continents. The morning brought its usual customers: families looking to restore inherited furniture, local business owners needing repairs for their establishments, and the occasional tourist who had discovered something valuable in a thrift store. Mia helped each one with quiet efficiency, her deep knowledge of craftsmanship carefully hidden behind simple explanations about wood grain and traditional techniques. As she worked, Mia allowed her mind to wander to the life she had left behind 15 years ago. Captain Mia Sullivan had been one of the military's elite search and rescue specialists, trained in high-altitude helicopter operations, wilderness survival, and emergency medical procedures. She had pulled survivors from earthquake rubble in Turkey, evacuated civilians from flooding in Bangladesh, and rescued stranded researchers from Antarctic storms. But the work had taken its toll. Too many missions where she couldn't save everyone. Too many nights lying awake thinking about the faces of those who didn't make it home. The final mission, a failed rescue attempt during a typhoon in the Philippines where 3 team members died under her command, had broken something inside her that she couldn't repair. So Captain Sullivan had disappeared, and Mia the furniture restorer had taken her place. Here in Cedar Ridge, she was safe from the weight of life and death decisions, from the crushing responsibility of other people's survival, from the nightmares that had haunted her for years. The bell above her workshop door chimed, interrupting her thoughts. A young woman entered, carrying a small wooden jewelry box with obvious water damage. "My grandmother's jewelry box got caught in our basement flood last month," the woman explained sadly. "Everyone says it's ruined, but I was hoping maybe you could work some magic." Mia examined the piece carefully, noting the warped wood and damaged finish. To most people, it would look beyond repair. But Mia saw past the damage to the craftsmanship underneath, quality construction that could survive with proper treatment. "I can save it," Mia said simply. "It'll take time, and it won't look exactly the same, but the heart of it is still strong." As the customer left with obvious relief, Mia returned to her work. She had no idea that her peaceful existence was about to be shattered by the arrival of someone who would force her to choose between the safety of anonymity and the dangerous necessity of action. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Cedar Ridge, bringing more than just rain to the quiet mountain town. Alex Warner stepped out of his black Tesla Model S and surveyed Cedar Ridge with the calculating gaze of someone who saw dollar signs where others saw history. At 35, he was everything the small mountain town was not: aggressive, technology-obsessed, and utterly convinced that progress meant replacement rather than preservation. His expensive suit looked absurd against the backdrop of weathered storefronts and hand-painted signs that had served the community for decades. Alex was a development executive from Denver, sent by Pinnacle Resorts International to evaluate Cedar Ridge for their latest project, a luxury mountain resort that would modernize the area for wealthy tourists. The assignment excited him. Alex saw opportunity where locals saw heritage, profit where they saw community. His preliminary research had identified the perfect location for the resort's main lodge, the historic town center, which would need to be completely demolished to make way for modern amenities. Alex's first stop was the town hall, where Mayor Janet Torres greeted him with the cautious politeness of someone who had dealt with developers before. "Mr. Warner, welcome to Cedar Ridge. I hope you'll take time to appreciate what makes our community special before making any recommendations." Alex barely listened to her welcoming speech, already mentally redesigning the quaint building into something more commercially viable. "Thank you, Mayor Torres. I'm sure you'll find that Pinnacle's proposal will bring prosperity to everyone in Cedar Ridge." His tone carried the confidence of someone who had never been told no, at least not by anyone whose opinion mattered to him. Of course, significant change will be necessary. The current downtown area is charming in a rustic way, but it doesn't meet modern hospitality standards. Mayor Torres's expression tightened. "What kind of changes are you talking about, Mr. Warner?" "Complete redevelopment," Alex replied casually, pulling out his tablet to show architectural renderings. "The old buildings will need to come down to make room for our flagship lodge. We're talking about a 5-star destination resort that will put Cedar Ridge on the map for affluent travelers." The mayor studied the sleek designs with growing alarm. The proposed lodge would occupy the entire historic downtown area, erasing a century of community history in favor of generic luxury that could be found at any corporate resort. "Mr. Warner, those buildings you want to demolish include businesses that have served our community for generations. These aren't just structures. They're people's livelihoods, their heritage." Alex's smile remained pleasant, but his eyes turned cold. "Mayor, I understand attachment to the past, but you have to consider the economic benefits. Pinnacle's investment will bring jobs, tax revenue, and regional recognition. Sometimes progress requires difficult decisions." What Alex didn't say, but his tone implied, was that the decision had already been made. Pinnacle had significant political influence and financial resources that small mountain towns rarely could resist. Cedar Ridge could cooperate or be forced to comply, but the outcome was inevitable. After the meeting, Alex began his walking survey of the downtown area, making notes about which buildings would need immediate demolition and which might be temporarily useful during construction. His dismissive attitude toward local concerns became clear as he moved through the community. At Patterson's flower farm, he interrupted Ruth's conversation with a customer to demand information about property values and tax assessments. When she tried to explain the farm's importance to local wedding and funeral traditions, Alex cut her off. "Ma'am, I'm sure your flowers are lovely, but this location would be perfect for our resort's helicopter landing pad. Pinnacle will make you a generous offer for the property." The casual dismissal of her life's work left Ruth speechless, but Alex had already moved on to examine the adjacent properties with the same cold efficiency. His route eventually brought him to Mia's workshop, where the sound of careful sanding could be heard through the open windows. Alex pushed through the door without knocking, immediately surveying the space with obvious distaste. "Excuse me," he announced, not bothering with introductions. "I'm conducting a property evaluation for development purposes. This building will need to be vacated within the next 6 months." Mia looked up from the antique desk she was refinishing, her calm green eyes taking in Alex's expensive clothes and arrogant posture. Something about his assumption of authority triggered warnings that she hadn't felt in years. I'm sorry. Who are you? She asked politely. Alex Warner, Pinnacle Resorts International. We're developing this area into a luxury destination resort. This particular location is designated for our main parking facility. His tone suggested that her opinion on the matter was neither requested nor relevant. Alex walked around the workshop, noting the building's age and construction with the detached interest of someone planning its destruction. You'll receive fair market compensation, of course, though I'd recommend finding alternative workspace sooner rather than later. These old buildings don't meet modern safety standards anyway. Mia set down her sanding block and studied Alex more carefully. She had encountered his type before in various parts of the world. People who confused authority with competence and assumed that everyone else would simply comply with their demands. This building has been serving the community for over 80 years, she said quietly. It's structurally sound, historically significant, and currently houses a business that employs local craftspeople. Alex laughed, a sound that carried no warmth. Look, lady, I understand you're attached to your little hobby workshop, but we're talking about real economic development here. Pinnacle's resort will bring millions of dollars to this area. Your furniture repair shop isn't exactly competing in the same league. The condescension in his voice was deliberate, designed to make her feel small and insignificant. Alex had used similar tactics successfully in dozens of other communities, wearing down local resistance through a combination of financial pressure and personal intimidation. Besides, he continued, examining a 19th century cabinet that Mia had spent weeks restoring, there's not much call for this kind of old-fashioned work anymore. People want modern conveniences, not antique furniture that falls apart after a few years. Mia felt heat rise in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. You might be surprised by how much strength these old pieces have when they're properly maintained. I'm sure you think so, Alex replied dismissively. But sentiment doesn't pay bills or create jobs. Pinnacle's development will employ hundreds of people and generate tax revenue that will benefit everyone in Cedar Ridge. Before Mia could respond, Alex was already heading toward the door. You'll be hearing from our legal team about the property transfer timeline. Try to be practical about this. Fighting progress just makes things more expensive for everyone. As the door slammed behind him, Mia stood alone in her workshop, feeling the familiar weight of being underestimated and dismissed. Alex Warner thought he understood Cedar Ridge and everyone in it. He was about to learn how dangerous assumptions could be. That evening, as Mia locked up her workshop and walked home to her small cabin in the woods, she noticed storm clouds gathering over the mountains. The Weather Service had issued warnings about unusual atmospheric conditions that could lead to severe flooding in the region. She had no idea that nature was about to provide the test that would reveal exactly who she really was. News of Alex's development plans spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. By the next morning, an emergency town meeting had been called, and nearly every resident crowded into the community center to discuss the threat to their home. Mayor Torres stood at the front of the room, her usually calm demeanor showing cracks of stress and anger. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing a situation that requires immediate action. Pinnacle Resorts is proposing to demolish our entire downtown area for a luxury resort development. Angry voices erupted from the crowd. Business owners whose families had served the community for generations demanded to know how this could happen without their consent. Elderly residents who had spent their entire lives in Cedar Ridge expressed outrage at the prospect of losing their heritage to corporate greed. They can't just take our businesses, protested Jim Rodriguez, whose family restaurant had been a town cornerstone for 40 years. This place is our life, our children's inheritance. Unfortunately, they can, replied Sarah Kim, the town's only attorney. Pinnacle has significant political connections and financial resources. They can use eminent domain proceedings, economic pressure, and legal challenges that most small business owners can't afford to fight. The crowd's anger mixed with growing despair as residents realized the scope of what they were facing. Alex Warner represented forces far beyond their ability to resist through conventional means. Mia sat in the back of the room, listening to her neighbor's concerns with the analytical mind that had once coordinated complex rescue operations. She understood the tactics Alex was using: psychological pressure combined with legal intimidation, designed to make resistance seem hopeless. "What about publicity?" suggested Beth Morrison, who ran the local newspaper. "If we can get media attention, maybe public pressure will make them reconsider." "Pinnacle has dealt with negative publicity before," Sarah replied grimly. "They have PR firms that specialize in managing community relations. They'll present this as economic development that benefits everyone, while portraying opposition as resistance to progress." As the meeting continued, Mia found herself studying the faces around her. These weren't wealthy people with political connections or legal resources. They were teachers, shop owners, retirees, and small business operators whose greatest crime was loving a place that someone else wanted to destroy. Alex Warner chose that moment to make his entrance, accompanied by two assistants carrying briefcases and wearing the kind of confident expressions that came with unlimited corporate backing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex announced without waiting for permission to speak, "I hoped to address some of the concerns that seem to be circulating about Pinnacle's development proposal." His tone was patronizing, like an adult explaining difficult concepts to children. "I understand that change can be frightening, especially in a community that's been isolated from modern economic opportunities. But Pinnacle's resort will bring prosperity to Cedar Ridge that you've never experienced." He gestured to his assistants, who began distributing glossy brochures showing the proposed resort's amenities. "We're talking about 500 direct jobs during construction, 200 permanent positions once we're operational, and millions of dollars in annual tax revenue." "What about the businesses you're planning to destroy?" Jim Rodriguez stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. "My restaurant employs 12 people from this community. My family has served meals here for 4 decades. Where do we fit into your plan?" Alex's smile never wavered. "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand your attachment to the past, but your restaurant serves maybe 50 meals a day to local customers. Our resort restaurant will serve 300 meals daily to guests who spend real money in the local economy." The dismissal was calculated to wound, and it succeeded. Jim's face flushed with anger and humiliation as Alex continued his presentation. "The truth is, Cedar Ridge has been economically stagnant for years. Young people leave because there are no opportunities here. Property values remain low because there's no demand for housing. Pinnacle's development will change all of that." What Alex didn't mention was that the jobs he promised would primarily go to workers imported from outside the community, that the tax revenue would come with massive infrastructure costs that local taxpayers would bear, and that the prosperity would flow primarily to corporate shareholders rather than local residents. "We're prepared to offer generous compensation packages for property acquisition," Alex continued. "Most of you will receive more money than your properties are currently worth. You can use that windfall to relocate to communities that better match your lifestyle preferences." The suggestion that residents should be grateful for being forced from their homes drew angry murmurs from the crowd. Alex seemed oblivious to their reaction, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Mia watched the presentation with growing disgust. She had seen similar tactics used by war profiteers and disaster capitalists in conflict zones around the world, people who thrived on others' misfortune and justified their actions with economic arguments that benefited only themselves. "What if we refuse to sell?" asked Mary Patterson, Ruth's daughter. Alex's smile turned cold. Ma'am, I hope that won't be necessary. Pinnacle prefers cooperative relationships with local communities, but we have legal options available if voluntary cooperation isn't possible. The threat was delivered with corporate politeness, but everyone in the room understood its meaning. Pinnacle would use every legal, financial, and political weapon at their disposal to get what they wanted. As Alex concluded his presentation and prepared to leave, Mia surprised herself by standing up. For 15 years, she had avoided confrontation, preferring the safety of anonymity to the risks of involvement. But watching Alex's systematic intimidation of her neighbors awakened something she thought she had left behind. Mr. Warner, she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly across the room. You've made a lot of promises about economic benefits, but you haven't addressed the community's concerns about losing their heritage and identity. Alex turned toward her with the patronizing patience of someone addressing a particularly slow child. And you are? Mia Sullivan. I own the furniture restoration workshop on Main Street. Ah, yes, the antique lady. Alex's tone dismissed her before she could continue. Ms. Sullivan, I understand that change is difficult for people who are comfortable with old-fashioned ways. But heritage doesn't pay for modern healthcare, education, or infrastructure improvements. Actually, Mia replied calmly, heritage often provides the foundation that makes sustainable development possible. Communities that maintain their identity and character tend to attract visitors and residents who value authenticity over generic amenities. Alex's expression hardened slightly. That's a romantic view, but the economics don't support it. Rural communities that resist modernization typically experience continued decline and population loss. And communities that sacrifice their identity for short-term profit often find that they've lost everything that made them worth living in, Mia countered. The exchange drew supportive murmurs from the crowd, but Alex seemed more annoyed than concerned. Ms. Sullivan, I appreciate your passion for preserving the past, but Pinnacle's development is happening whether you approve or not. You can be part of the solution or part of the problem, but you can't stop progress. His dismissal was meant to end the conversation, but Mia held his gaze steadily. Progress isn't always about replacing what exists with something newer and more expensive. Sometimes it's about building on the strengths that are already there. Alex laughed, the sound echoing through the now silent community center. That's the kind of thinking that keeps places like Cedar Ridge stuck in the past. Pinnacle brings real-world experience and resources that can actually make a difference. As Alex and his assistants left the meeting, the room erupted in angry discussions about legal options and resistance strategies. But Mia remained quiet, her mind working through tactical possibilities that her neighbors couldn't imagine. She had spent years avoiding the kind of conflict that Alex Warner represented. But some fights, she was beginning to realize, couldn't be avoided without sacrificing everything that mattered. The storm clouds gathering over Cedar Ridge were about to deliver more than just rain. 3 days after the town meeting, the storm that meteorologists had been tracking finally struck Cedar Ridge with unprecedented fury. What began as heavy rain quickly became a deluge that overwhelmed the mountain drainage systems, turning peaceful streams into raging torrents that swept away everything in their path. Mia woke before dawn to the sound of emergency sirens echoing through the valley. She stepped onto her cabin's porch and immediately understood the severity of the situation. The normally quiet creek behind her property had become a brown torrent, carrying debris from upstream areas, and the rain continued to fall in sheets that reduced visibility to mere yards. Her emergency radio crackled with reports from the county dispatch center. Multiple road closures due to flooding, evacuations in progress for low-lying areas, emergency shelters opening at the high school and community center. Mia dressed quickly in practical clothes, her mind automatically shifting into the analytical mode that had served her during countless crisis situations. 15 years of quiet civilian life hadn't erased the instincts that had made her one of the military's most effective rescue coordinators. She loaded her pickup truck with emergency supplies and headed toward town, navigating around fallen trees and increasingly dangerous water levels. The sight that greeted her in Cedar Ridge's downtown area was devastating. Main Street was under 3 feet of water, and several historic buildings were showing signs of structural damage from the flood's relentless pressure. At the Emergency Command Center, hastily established in the fire station, Mayor Torres was coordinating with county officials and state emergency services. Her face showed the strain of someone trying to manage a crisis that exceeded all local resources. "Mia, thank God you're here," Torres called out when she spotted her entering the command center. "We need every able-bodied person helping with evacuations and supply distribution." "What's the current situation?" Mia asked, studying the maps and status boards that emergency coordinators had set up. 14 families evacuated from the Riverside area, power out to most of the downtown, and the main bridge is showing stress fractures that might force us to close it completely, Torres replied grimly. "But we've got a bigger problem." She pointed to a map marking the location of the Pinnacle Development Team's temporary headquarters, a luxury cabin complex 5 miles upstream from town. Alex Warner and his crew were conducting site surveys in the remote canyon area when the storm hit. They're trapped in high ground by rising water, and the county search and rescue team can't reach them. Mia felt her pulse quicken as she studied the topographical maps. The canyon area was notoriously difficult to access under normal conditions, and floodwaters would have made it virtually impassable for standard rescue vehicles. "What about helicopter evacuation?" she asked. "Weather conditions are too severe for safe flight operations," replied Captain Rodriguez from the county sheriff's department. "Wind shear and zero visibility make aerial rescue impossible until the storm passes." How long until conditions improve? Meteorologists are saying another 6 to 8 hours of severe weather, then gradual clearing. But the water levels won't drop significantly for at least 12 hours after the rain stops. Mia studied the maps more carefully, her trained eye noting elevation changes, potential access routes, and natural obstacles that would affect any rescue attempt. Her neighbors saw an impossible situation, but she saw a complex tactical problem with solutions that required specialized knowledge and equipment. "How many people are trapped?" she asked. 6 members of the development team, including Warner. They managed to reach high ground and establish radio contact, but they're reporting rising water levels that might force them to move to even higher elevation. "What kind of communication do we have with them?" Captain Rodriguez handed her a radio handset. "Emergency frequency, but signal strength is weak due to atmospheric interference." Mia keyed the radio and spoke in the calm, professional tone that had once coordinated rescue operations across 3 continents. "Pinnacle Team, this is Cedar Ridge Emergency Coordination. Please respond with current status and location information." The response came through heavy static. "Cedar Ridge. This is Warner. 6 personnel trapped on ridge above canyon floor. Water still rising. Need immediate evacuation." Despite everything Alex had done to her community, Mia felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with life or death situations. People were in danger, and she had the skills to save them. Everything else was secondary to that fundamental responsibility. "Mr. Warner, this is Mia Sullivan. I need you to provide detailed information about your exact location, available shelter, and immediate hazards." Sullivan? The furniture lady? Even through the static, Alex's surprise was evident. "What are you doing on emergency frequency?" "Mr. Warner, I'm trying to coordinate your rescue. Please answer my questions about your current situation. Over the next 10 minutes, Mia extracted detailed information about the team's location, available supplies, and the rising water that threatened to cut off their remaining escape routes. Her questions were precise and professional, designed to gather the tactical intelligence necessary for planning a rescue operation. Captain Rodriguez watched with growing amazement as Mia transformed from quiet furniture restorer to competent emergency coordinator. Ma'am, you seem to know a lot about search and rescue procedures. I've had some experience, Mia replied quietly, her attention focused on the maps and weather reports. In her mind, she was already planning an operation that would have been challenging even with full military resources and perfect conditions. But as she studied the tactical situation, Mia realized that conventional rescue approaches wouldn't work. The terrain was too difficult, the weather too severe, and the time constraints too tight for standard emergency response protocols. This was exactly the kind of impossible situation that had once required her to push beyond normal limitations and find solutions that existed only in the gray area between reckless and necessary. Mia made a decision that would finally reveal who she really was to the community she had called home for 15 years. Mayor Torres, she said quietly, I need to make some phone calls and gather some equipment. I think I can get those people out. Mia, I appreciate your willingness to help, but this isn't something for civilians to attempt. We'll wait for conditions to improve and let the professionals handle it. Mia met Torres's eyes with steady calm. Mayor, I am a professional, and if we wait for conditions to improve, those people might not survive long enough to be rescued. 20 minutes later, Mia stood in her workshop surrounded by equipment that most of her neighbors had never seen before. Hidden behind false walls and beneath carefully constructed storage areas were the tools of her former profession: advanced climbing gear, weather-resistant communication equipment, emergency medical supplies, and survival equipment rated for extreme conditions. But the most revealing item was the flight suit hanging in a locked cabinet, bearing patches and insignia that told the story of Captain Mia Sullivan's distinguished career in military search and rescue operations. Next to it hung a helmet with Guardian stenciled across the front, her call sign during 15 years of high-risk missions. Mayor Torres and Captain Rodriguez watched in amazement as Mia assembled gear with the efficiency of someone who had performed the same preparations countless times under pressure. Mia, Torres said quietly, who are you really? Mia paused in her equipment check and met the mayor's eyes. 15 years ago, I was Captain Mia Sullivan, U.S. Air Force Search and Rescue. I coordinated rescue operations in earthquake zones, hurricane areas, combat situations, and natural disaster sites around the world. She pulled out a waterproof case containing maps and technical documents that showed detailed knowledge of the local terrain. I've been studying this area's topography since I moved here. I know every trail, every elevation change, and every potential access route within 50 miles of Cedar Ridge. Captain Rodriguez examined the military-grade equipment with professional interest. What's your plan, Captain? The standard approach would be to wait for helicopter evacuation once weather conditions improve, but that could take too long. The alternative is a ground-based rescue using specialized mountaineering techniques to reach the trapped personnel and guide them to safety. Mia spread topographical maps across her workbench, pointing to potential routes that avoided the worst flood areas while maintaining access to the canyon where Alex's team was trapped. There's a service road that connects to an old mining trail about 2 miles from their position. If I can reach that trail system, I can approach their location from above and establish a safe evacuation route. That sounds incredibly dangerous in these weather conditions, Torres observed. It is dangerous, Mia agreed. but it's also feasible for someone with the right training and equipment. I've conducted similar operations in worse conditions. She began loading gear into a specially modified backpack designed for rapid deployment in crisis situations. The key is moving quickly while conditions are still manageable, before the situation deteriorates further. As Mia prepared for departure, her radio crackled with an urgent transmission from Alex's team. Cedar Ridge emergency. Situation deteriorating rapidly. Water levels forcing us to higher elevation. Request immediate assistance. Mr. Warner, this is Mia Sullivan. I'm en route to your location with rescue equipment. Estimated arrival time is 90 minutes. Can you hold your current position that long? Sullivan, you're coming out here yourself? This isn't a job for civilians. Even in his desperate situation, Alex couldn't resist dismissing her capabilities. Mia's response was professionally calm, but carried an edge of authority that silenced his protests. Mr. Warner, I'm a trained search and rescue specialist with 15 years of experience in similar conditions. Follow my instructions exactly, and I'll get you and your team to safety. She turned to Torres and Rodriguez before departing. Monitor the emergency frequency for regular updates. If I don't report in every 30 minutes, assume something has gone wrong and contact state emergency services for backup support. As Mia loaded her equipment into the specially modified pickup truck she used for reaching remote work sites, Captain Rodriguez pulled her aside. Captain, I have to ask, why did you leave search and rescue to become a furniture restorer? Mia was quiet for a moment, checking her equipment one final time. Because I got tired of missions where I couldn't save everyone. I thought if I stepped away from emergency response, I wouldn't have to carry that weight anymore. But you never really left it behind, did you? No, Mia admitted. I just found a way to use my skills differently. Restoring furniture is another kind of rescue, taking something broken and giving it new life. She climbed into the truck and started the engine. But some situations require the original skill set. As Mia drove through the flooded streets of Cedar Ridge toward the treacherous mountain roads that would take her to Alex's location, she felt the familiar combination of fear and purpose that had defined her military career. 15 years of peaceful civilian life were about to be measured against one afternoon of crisis. Behind her, the community she had sworn to protect watched through the storm as their quiet furniture restorer transformed into the guardian they had never known they needed. The radio crackled with Alex's increasingly desperate updates as Mia navigated toward the most dangerous rescue operation of her career. The mountain road to the canyon area had become a treacherous obstacle course of fallen trees, washouts, and debris flows that would have stopped most vehicles. But Mia's truck had been modified with heavy-duty suspension, all-terrain tires, and emergency equipment specifically designed for reaching remote locations under adverse conditions. She navigated the hazardous route with steady concentration, her trained mind automatically calculating risks and alternatives while monitoring radio communications from Alex's increasingly desperate team. Years of driving in combat zones and disaster areas had taught her to find paths where others saw only barriers. Cedar Ridge emergency. This is Guardian en route, she radioed using her old call sign without conscious thought. Current position approximately 2 miles from target location. Weather conditions remain severe but manageable. Mayor Torres's voice came back through the static. Guardian? Mia, did you just say Guardian? Did. Copy, Mayor. Guardian was my operational call sign during active service. Old habits under pressure. What Mia didn't mention was that Guardian had become legendary in military search and rescue circles. The coordinator who attempted missions others considered impossible and brought everyone home against overwhelming odds. The truck finally reached the end of navigable road, forcing Mia to continue on foot with her equipment pack. The weight of 60 pounds of rescue gear felt familiar across her shoulders as she began the treacherous hike toward Alex's location. The trail had been transformed by flooding into a series of dangerous stream crossings and unstable slopes that required constant attention and careful route finding. But Mia moved with the steady rhythm of someone who had covered similar terrain under hostile fire, her boots finding secure footing where others would have struggled. 40 minutes into the hike, her radio crackled with an urgent transmission. Cedar Ridge emergency. Warner here. Water rising faster than expected. Being forced to evacuation current position, moving to higher elevation. Mia immediately stopped and pulled out her topographical map, calculating new coordinates based on Alex's reported movement. The team was being pushed toward an area with limited escape routes. If they became trapped there, rescue would become much more complicated. Mr. Warner, this is Guardian. What is your current elevation and approximate direction of movement? Guardian? Who is Guardian? I thought Sullivan was coming to get us. Mr. Warner, I am Guardian. Please answer my questions about your current position so I can adjust my approach route. The professional authority in her voice cut through Alex's confusion and panic. Moving uphill toward what looks like a rock formation, maybe 800 feet above the canyon floor? Mia smiled grimly as she identified Alex's location on her map. They were heading toward Devil's Backbone, a narrow ridge that would provide temporary safety but could easily become a trap if water levels continued rising. Mr. Warner, you're moving toward a ridge formation that will provide good shelter but limited escape routes. Can you see any alternative paths leading away from the ridge? Negative. Everything else is too steep or already flooded. Mia adjusted her route to intercept the team before they became completely trapped on the ridge. The change required crossing 2 flood-swollen streams and climbing nearly vertical rock faces, but it would position her to guide them to safety before their situation became hopeless. As she rappelled down a cliff face that had become a waterfall due to storm runoff, Mia felt the familiar clarity that came with high-stakes operations. Her civilian life in Cedar Ridge felt distant, replaced by the focused intensity of mission execution. The sound of voices carried through the storm as she approached Alex's location. She could hear panic in their voices. 6 people who had never faced a genuine survival situation, trying to cope with conditions that tested even experienced outdoor professionals. Mia established visual contact with the group from a concealed position above their temporary shelter. Alex and his team had taken refuge behind a large boulder formation that provided some protection from wind and rain. But their position was increasingly precarious as water levels continued to rise. Pinnacle Team, this is Guardian. I have visual contact with your position. I'm going to approach from your 11 o'clock direction. Stay calm and follow my instructions exactly. Alex's voice came back immediately. Guardian, thank God. How many people are with you? When will the helicopters arrive? Mr. Warner, I'm operating alone, and helicopter evacuation isn't possible in these conditions. I'm going to guide you out on foot using mountaineering techniques. Alone? You came alone? The disbelief in Alex's voice was mixed with growing panic. We need professional rescue teams with proper equipment. Mia appeared at the edge of their shelter like a ghost materializing from the storm. Her equipment and bearing left no doubt about her professional competence, but Alex still struggled to reconcile the woman he had dismissed as a furniture restorer with the obviously skilled rescue specialist now standing before him. Mr. Warner, I am a professional, Mia said calmly as she assessed the team's condition and equipment. I've conducted rescue operations in conditions much worse than this. She quickly evaluated each team member for injuries, hypothermia, and stress levels. Most were holding up reasonably well physically, but their psychological state was deteriorating rapidly as fear and panic took hold. Listen carefully, everyone. We're going to move to higher ground using a route that requires some basic climbing skills. I'll guide each of you individually and provide safety equipment, but you need to trust my instructions completely. Alex stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. Look, I don't know who you really are, but this is insane. We should wait for real rescue teams with helicopters and proper resources. Mia met his eyes with the steady calm that had once reassured soldiers in combat zones. Mr. Warner, I am real rescue. And if we wait for conditions to improve, rising water will cut off our escape routes completely. We move now, or we don't move at all. She began distributing emergency climbing harnesses and safety equipment from her pack, adjusting each piece with the efficiency of someone who had performed the same procedures hundreds of times. The route I've identified will take us to stable ground approximately 1 mile from here. It requires crossing 2 stream beds and climbing sections that demand careful attention to safety protocols. As Mia prepared the team for evacuation, she maintained radio contact with Cedar Ridge Emergency Coordination. Base, this is Guardian. Have reached Pinnacle Team and am beginning evacuation procedures. 6 personnel in good condition, no injuries requiring immediate medical attention. Mayor Torres's voice crackled back. Guardian, Weather Service reports conditions worsening over next 2 hours. Can you complete evacuation before situation deteriorates further? Affirmative, Base. Estimated time to safe ground is 90 minutes using planned route. Will maintain regular communication. Mia turned back to Alex's team, her voice carrying the authority that had once commanded respect in military operations around the world. We're moving out in 5 minutes. Stay close, follow exactly in my footsteps, and remember that your safety depends on teamwork and discipline. The evacuation route Mia had planned would have challenged experienced mountaineers under ideal conditions. In the middle of a severe storm, with panicked civilians and rising floodwaters, it bordered on impossible. But impossible had been Mia's specialty for 15 years. She led the group along a narrow ledge that hugged the canyon wall, each step carefully tested before trusting her weight to potentially unstable rock. Behind her, Alex's team moved with the hesitant uncertainty of people far outside their comfort zone. Guardian, I can't do this, called Sarah Kim, one of Alex's assistants, as they approached the first major obstacle, a gap in the ledge that required a short but exposed traverse across open rock face. Mia immediately established a secure belay position and helped Sarah into a climbing harness. Sarah, I'm going to guide you across this section step by step. The rock is solid, the safety rope will catch any slip, and I'll be controlling your movement the entire time. Her voice carried the calm confidence that had once talked wounded soldiers through complex medical procedures under fire. The key is to focus on one move at a time. Don't look down. Don't think about the overall distance, just follow my instructions. As Sarah made the crossing successfully, the rest of the team began to understand that their survival depended on trusting someone they had previously dismissed as irrelevant. Alex watched with growing amazement as Mia demonstrated skills that obviously came from extensive training and real-world experience. The second major obstacle was a flooded stream crossing that had become a raging torrent carrying debris from upstream areas. Normal crossing points were now underwater, forcing Mia to improvise a solution using rope work and anchor points that she established in the surrounding rock formations. This is absolutely insane, Alex muttered as he watched Mia rig a complex pulley system that would allow the team to cross above the dangerous water. How do you even know how to do this stuff? 15 years of practice in places where mistakes had permanent consequences, Mia replied without stopping her work. She tested each anchor point with her full body weight before trusting the system to support others. As the team crossed the improvised bridge one by one, Mia maintained constant communication with each person, adjusting their equipment and providing encouragement that kept panic from overwhelming their limited technical skills. "Outstanding work, everyone," she radioed to Cedar Ridge Base. "Successfully negotiated major obstacles. Current position approximately half a mile from target destination." But their radio celebration was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Weather Service. "All units in Canyon area. Be advised that dam overflow from upstream reservoir creating dangerous flood surge. Estimated arrival your area in 30 minutes." Mia felt ice form in her stomach as she processed the implications. A dam overflow would create a wall of water that would sweep away everything in the canyon, including the route they had planned to use for the final portion of their evacuation. "Base, this is Guardian. Received warning about flood surge. Adjusting route to reach high ground before surge arrival." She turned to Alex's team with renewed urgency. "We need to move faster. There's a flood surge coming that will make our planned route impassable." "How much faster?" Alex asked, finally beginning to understand the severity of their situation. "Fast enough to reach safety in 25 minutes instead of the 40 minutes we planned for." The pace Mia set for the final push would have been demanding for experienced hikers under normal conditions. For exhausted, terrified civilians in a storm, it required reserves of determination they didn't know they possessed. Mia led them up steep terrain using handholds and footholds that required constant attention and careful movement. She established safety lines wherever possible, but much of the climbing demanded individual skill and courage that tested everyone's limits. "I can't make it," gasped Tom Bradley, Alex's senior assistant, as they approached the final cliff section that would bring them to safety. "My legs are giving out." Without hesitation, Mia rigged a mechanical advantage system that would allow her to literally haul Tom up the cliff face using ropework and anchors. The procedure required her to climb the section twice, once to establish anchors, once to operate the hauling system. But she accomplished it with steady efficiency that spoke of extensive experience. As the last team member reached the safe plateau above the canyon, the sound of approaching water could be heard echoing through the valley below them. Minutes later, a brown wall of debris-filled flood surge swept through the exact area where they had been trapped, carrying away everything in its path. Alex stared at the destruction below them, finally understanding how close they had come to disaster. "You saved our lives," he said quietly. "If you hadn't reached us when you did..." "That's what search and rescue specialists do," Mia replied simply. "We find people who need help and bring them home safely." The helicopter evacuation that finally became possible as weather conditions improved brought Alex's team back to Cedar Ridge, where they were met by emergency medical personnel, local officials, and news crews that had arrived to cover the flood story. But the real story wasn't the flood damage or the corporate development controversy. The real story was the quiet furniture restorer who had just completed one of the most remarkable civilian rescue operations in the region's history. As paramedics checked Alex's team for injuries and exposure, Captain Rodriguez approached Mia with a mixture of respect and curiosity that reflected everyone's need to understand what they had witnessed. "Captain Sullivan," he said formally, "I've been researching your military record while you were conducting the rescue operation. The Pentagon confirms that you were awarded the Air Force Cross for valor during hurricane rescue operations in Puerto Rico, and that you hold the military record for most successful extractions under combat conditions." Mia nodded quietly, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding that her cover was permanently blown. "That was a different life, Captain. I've been trying to leave that behind for 15 years. "Why?" asked Mayor Torres, who had been listening to the conversation. "Why would someone with your skills and experience choose to hide in a small town restoring furniture?" The question struck to the heart of everything Mia had been running from since leaving the military. She looked around at the crowd of neighbors, reporters, and officials who were waiting for her answer. "Because I got tired of making life and death decisions for other people," she said finally. "I lost team members under my command, watched people die that I couldn't save, and carried the weight of impossible choices for too many years." Alex approached the group, his expensive clothes torn and muddy from the rescue operation. For the first time since arriving in Cedar Ridge, he looked humble and uncertain. "Ms. Sullivan, Mia, I owe you more than just thanks," he said quietly. "I owe you an apology for everything I said about you, about this community, about the value of what you do here." Mia studied his face, seeing genuine remorse rather than the calculating arrogance she had grown to expect. "Mr. Warner, you were doing your job the way you thought it should be done. Sometimes crisis shows us perspectives we hadn't considered before." "No," Alex insisted. "I was being an arrogant ass who thought he knew everything about places and people I'd never bothered to understand. You risked your life to save someone who had treated you and your community with nothing but contempt." The admission drew surprised looks from the crowd, but Alex continued with obvious sincerity. "I came here thinking Cedar Ridge was just another small town full of people who didn't understand modern business. Instead, I found a community with someone who has more real-world expertise and courage than anyone I've worked with in corporate environments." A reporter from the Denver Post, who had driven up to cover the flood story, began asking questions about Mia's military background and the rescue operation. Word was spreading through news networks about the hero of Cedar Ridge who had appeared from nowhere to save trapped developers. "Captain Sullivan, can you tell us about your most challenging rescue operation during your military career?" Mia held up her hand to stop the questions. "I appreciate the interest, but I'm not comfortable being treated as some kind of hero. I did what anyone with the right training would have done in the same situation." "But that's exactly the point," interrupted Sarah Kim, the attorney who had been working on the community's legal options against Pinnacle's development. "You had the right training, and you used it to help people who needed it. That's the definition of heroism." Alex stepped forward again, addressing the crowd that had gathered. "I want everyone to know that Pinnacle Resorts is withdrawing our development proposal for Cedar Ridge. This community has something that can't be bought or built: genuine character and people who take care of each other." The announcement drew surprised murmurs from the crowd, but Alex continued with conviction that seemed to come from a fundamental change in perspective. "More than that, I'm recommending to Pinnacle's board that we establish a partnership with Cedar Ridge to develop ecotourism and heritage preservation programs that support the existing community rather than replacing it." Mayor Torres looked stunned. "Mr. Warner, this is a complete reversal of everything you proposed yesterday." "Yesterday, I didn't understand what I was really looking at," Alex replied. "I saw buildings and thought about demolition. I saw small businesses and thought about inefficiency. I saw people who disagreed with me and thought about obstacles to progress." He gestured toward Mia, who was trying unsuccessfully to avoid the spotlight. "Today, I learned that the woman I dismissed as just a furniture restorer is one of the most qualified emergency response specialists in the country. It made me wonder what else I was missing by making assumptions based on appearances." The crowd began dispersing as emergency crews completed their damage assessments and media representatives filed their stories. But Alex lingered, clearly wanting to say something more to Mia. "There's something else I need to ask you," he said when they had some privacy. "Would you consider working with us on developing emergency preparedness and safety protocols for mountain tourism? Your expertise could help protect thousands of visitors and residents." Mia was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer and its implications. For 15 years, she had avoided any situation that might require her to use her rescue skills professionally. But today's operation had reminded her of something she had forgotten: the satisfaction of using her abilities to help people in genuine need. "I'll think about it," she said finally, "but any involvement would have to be on my terms, in ways that support this community rather than changing it into something else." Alex smiled, the expression completely different from the condescending arrogance he had displayed just days earlier. "I think that's exactly what we need. Someone who understands that the best development preserves what's already valuable while adding new possibilities." 3 months after the flood, Cedar Ridge had settled into a new rhythm that balanced preservation with carefully planned progress. Alex's partnership proposal had evolved into a comprehensive program that brought tourism revenue to local businesses while maintaining the community's historic character and natural beauty. Mia's role in the new arrangement surprised everyone, including herself. Rather than returning to full-time search and rescue work, she had become Cedar Ridge's emergency preparedness coordinator, a position that allowed her to use her expertise while remaining rooted in the community she had grown to love. Her workshop had expanded to include a training center where she taught wilderness safety, basic first aid, and emergency response skills to local residents and visitors. The courses drew participants from across the region, people who had heard about the Guardian of Cedar Ridge and wanted to learn from someone with her experience. On a crisp autumn morning, Mia stood in her expanded workshop, putting finishing touches on an antique desk that would be displayed in the new Cedar Ridge Heritage Center. The project combined her restoration skills with her new role as a community guardian, preserving the past while preparing for the future. "Morning, Mia," called Ruth Patterson as she entered with a group of visitors who had signed up for the day's wilderness safety course. "Your students are ready to learn how to stay safe in the mountains." Mia smiled as she surveyed the group, a mix of local teenagers, visiting hikers, and even a few corporate executives from Denver who had heard about the unique training program. "Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to cover basic navigation, weather assessment, and emergency signaling techniques." As she led the group through practical exercises, Mia reflected on how much had changed since the flood. She was no longer hiding from her past, but integrating it with her chosen present in ways that served others rather than just protecting herself. Alex Warner had become an unexpected ally, using his corporate connections to bring resources and attention to Cedar Ridge's conservation and tourism initiatives. His experience during the rescue had genuinely changed his perspective on community development and environmental stewardship. "Mia," Alex called out as he approached the training area with a small group of investors he was escorting through the Heritage Center. "Would you have a few minutes to discuss the emergency protocols for the new hiking trail system?" The relationship between Mia and Alex had evolved into professional respect and personal friendship based on their shared commitment to responsible development. Alex had learned to value expertise over assumptions, while Mia had learned that not everyone who wielded corporate power was necessarily an enemy of community values. "Of course," Mia replied, finishing her demonstration of compass navigation before joining Alex and his group. "What specific concerns do you have about the trail system?" As they discussed emergency communication stations, weather monitoring equipment, and evacuation procedures, it became clear that Alex had internalized many of the lessons from his own rescue experience. He asked informed questions about risk assessment and safety protocols that showed genuine understanding of the challenges involved. The goal is to provide visitors with adventure opportunities while ensuring that we can respond effectively if someone gets into trouble, Alex explained to his investors. "Mia's expertise helps us design systems that protect people without destroying the natural experience they're seeking." One of the investors, a woman from a major outdoor equipment company, studied Mia with obvious interest. "Captain Sullivan, we've been following your story since the flood rescue. Would you be interested in consulting on safety equipment design for extreme environment applications? The offer represented exactly the kind of high profile opportunity that Mia had once pursued and later fled from. But now, with the stability of her Cedar Ridge life and the confidence that came from successfully integrating her skills with her values, she could consider such opportunities without fear of losing herself in them. "I'd be willing to discuss it," Mia replied, "but my primary commitment remains to this community and the programs we're developing here." As the group moved on to examine other aspects of the Heritage Center, Mia returned to her workshop and the antique desk that waited for her attention. The piece had been severely damaged in the flood, but careful restoration was bringing out the beautiful wood grain and original craftsmanship that had been hidden beneath years of neglect. Her hands moved across the wood surface with the same precision that had once operated rescue equipment in crisis situations. Both activities required patience, skill, and the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. Emma, her former piano student who now helped with the workshop tours, approached with a question from visitors about Mia's military service. "Miss Mia, some people are asking about the medals in the display case. Should I explain what they're for?" Mia looked toward the small memorial display she had finally agreed to create, honoring the team members who had died under her command during her final military mission. She had resisted the display for months, but ultimately realized that acknowledging their sacrifice was more important than protecting her own privacy. "Tell them that the medals represent people who gave their lives serving others," Mia said quietly. "The important thing isn't the decorations, but the reminder that real heroism usually involves people who don't think of themselves as heroes." As evening approached and the workshop tours concluded, Mia found herself alone with the antique desk and her thoughts about the unexpected direction her life had taken. 15 years ago, she had fled from responsibility and publicity, seeking anonymous safety in a place where no one knew her history. Today, she was more public than ever, featured in magazine articles and documentary films about civilian heroism and community resilience. But the difference was that now she was using her visibility to serve others, rather than seeking recognition for herself. Her radio crackled with a routine check-in from the county emergency services. "Cedar Ridge Base, this is County Dispatch. Any emergency traffic or weather concerns for evening hours?" "County Dispatch, this is Guardian," Mia replied automatically, her old call sign now officially recognized by regional emergency services. "No emergency traffic. Conditions normal and monitoring frequencies as always." The response felt natural in a way that surprised her. For years, she had resisted any association with her military identity, but now she had found a way to honor that service while creating something new and meaningful. Outside her workshop windows, the lights of Cedar Ridge twinkled in the gathering dusk. The community had survived the flood, the development threat, and the changes that followed, emerging stronger and more resilient than before. Mia Sullivan, once known as Captain Sullivan and later as Guardian, had finally found the balance between serving others and protecting herself. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The antique desk would be beautiful when she finished restoring it. But more importantly, it would serve the community for years to come, just as she intended to do. Some things she had learned were worth preserving exactly as they were, while others needed careful restoration to reveal their true potential. Both approaches required the same fundamental skill: the ability to see what could be, not just what was. 1 year after the flood, Cedar Ridge hosted its first annual Mountain Heritage and Safety Festival, an event that had grown from Alex's partnership proposal into a regional celebration that attracted visitors from across the country. The festival combined historical preservation with outdoor education, bringing together expertise from military, civilian, and corporate communities in ways that benefited everyone involved. Mia stood at the festival's central information booth wearing a simple name tag that read Mia Sullivan, Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. The title didn't capture the complexity of her role in the community, but it represented something she had never achieved in her military career: the integration of her professional skills with her personal values. A young woman approached the booth with obvious nervousness, carrying a folder that suggested she was seeking more than just tourist information. "Excuse me, are you Captain Sullivan? The guardian who saved those people during the flood?" Mia smiled gently, recognizing the mixture of admiration and uncertainty in the young woman's voice. "I'm Mia Sullivan. I coordinate emergency preparedness programs for the community. How can I help you?" "My name is Jessica Rodriguez. I'm a civilian paramedic, but I've been thinking about military service in search and rescue operations. Everyone says you're the person to talk to about what that kind of work really involves." The question transported Mia back to her own younger self, filled with idealism and determination to make a difference in the world. She gestured toward a quiet corner where they could talk privately. "Jessica, search and rescue work can be incredibly rewarding, but it's also demanding in ways that are difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced it. Are you prepared for situations where you can't save everyone?" "I think so," Jessica replied, though her uncertainty was obvious. "I've seen difficult situations as a paramedic, people dying despite our best efforts, but I want to help in places where no one else can reach." Mia studied the young woman's face, seeing echoes of her own motivation from decades earlier. "That's exactly why I became a rescue specialist. But the military will change you in ways you can't anticipate. The question is whether those changes will strengthen your ability to serve others or damage your capacity for personal relationships." They talked for an hour about training requirements, deployment expectations, and the psychological challenges of working in extreme situations. Mia found herself giving the kind of honest advice she wished someone had given her before she committed to a career that eventually consumed her entire identity. "The most important thing," Mia concluded, "is to remember why you're doing the work. If you lose sight of the people you're trying to help, the technical skills become meaningless." As Jessica left with obvious gratitude and renewed determination, Alex approached the booth carrying a press release about Pinnacle's latest community partnership announcement. "Mia, I wanted you to see this before it goes public. Pinnacle is establishing a permanent mountain safety research center here in Cedar Ridge, with you as the founding director, if you're interested." The offer represented another major opportunity, one that would bring significant resources and national attention to their community programs. But Mia had learned to evaluate such opportunities carefully, considering their long-term impact on her personal stability and community commitments. "What would the research center actually do?" she asked. "Develop new safety equipment and protocols for extreme environment operations, train emergency responders from around the country, and serve as a model for community-based disaster preparedness," Alex explained. "Essentially, it would formalize and expand everything you're already doing here." Mia considered the proposal while watching festival visitors explore displays about local history, wilderness safety, and environmental conservation. The integration of preservation and progress had worked well for Cedar Ridge, creating opportunities without destroying the community's essential character. "I'll consider it," she said finally, "but with the same conditions as our other partnerships. Any research center would have to serve this community first, with broader applications being secondary benefits." Alex nodded with the understanding that had developed through their year of working together. "That's exactly what makes these programs successful. They're built on genuine local needs rather than imposed from outside." As evening approached and the festival wound down, Mia walked through downtown Cedar Ridge, noting the subtle changes that had occurred since Alex's first visit. New businesses had opened to serve increased tourism, but they were locally owned enterprises that reflected the community's values rather than corporate franchises. The Heritage Center displayed artifacts and stories that celebrated Cedar Ridge's history while acknowledging the challenges and changes that had shaped the community over time. Mia's own story had become part of that narrative, not as heroic legend, but as an example of how individuals could serve others while remaining true to themselves. Her radio crackled with a routine evening check-in from County Emergency Services, a reminder that her guardian role never really ended, just shifted between active crisis response and quiet preparedness. Guardian, this is County Dispatch. Any traffic or concerns for evening hours? County Dispatch, Guardian. All clear in Cedar Ridge. Standing by as always. The exchange had become a comforting ritual, a daily affirmation that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Not hiding from her past or running toward an uncertain future, but present in the moment and committed to the people and place she had chosen to protect. Mia Sullivan had finally learned the difference between serving others and losing herself in service. She had found a way to be guardian without sacrificing the woman who chose to restore broken things and make them beautiful again. Some stories, she realized, don't end with dramatic victories or defeats. The best stories simply continue day after day with quiet acts of service that make the world a little safer and more hopeful for everyone involved. As she locked up her workshop and headed home to her cabin in the woods, Mia carried with her the satisfaction of work well done and the anticipation of tomorrow's opportunities to help others discover their own strength and resilience. The lights of Cedar Ridge glowed softly in the mountain night, a community at peace with itself and prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. And somewhere in those lights was the workshop where broken things became beautiful again, watched over by a guardian who had learned that the greatest heroism was simply refusing to give up on the possibility of making things better. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.